Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out from Shittim with all the Israelites, and they came to the Jordan. They camped there before crossing over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, "When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it, so that you may know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, the ark, a distance of about 2,000 cubits. Do not come any nearer to it." Then Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." To the priests, Joshua said, "Take up the ark of the covenant and pass up in front of the people." So they took up the ark of the covenant and went in front of the people. And then the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know that I will be with you as I was with Moses. You are the one who shall command the priests to bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua then said to the Israelites, "Draw near and hear the words of the Lord your God." So Joshua said, "By this you shall know that among you is the living God, who without fail will drive out from before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to pass before you into the Jordan. So now select 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. When the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the Jordan of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off. They shall stand in a single heap. When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the ark of the covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, rising up in a single heap far off at Adam, the city that is beside Zarephath. While those flowing toward the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho. While all Israel were crossing over on dry ground, the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Thank you, Reverend.
Morning. Morning. Oh, come on, I know Miss Susan is awake this morning. Good morning. Good morning. There you go. I kind of thought that she might, after looking at that reading, say, we're going to let Rowdy read that this morning. All those.
I think I did most of the names right.
You did. You did quite well, Miss Susan. You did quite well, I tell you. You got to watch out for some of the Old Testament reading. I don't know. Did anybody notice there what was split when they went across?
What was split?
Yeah, what was split when they went across?
River people.
What group of water?
Oh, River Jordan.
The River Jordan. Wait a second. It wasn't the Red Sea?
No, this is the second one.
That's right. This is the second. Y'all, as I grew up, all I ever heard about was the Red Sea. That's all you ever hear about when you talk about the waters parting and people going across. All you ever hear about is the Red Sea. But then you're reading this and you think, oh, I've heard this story before. But then you get down there, if you're not really paying attention, you still think it's all referencing back, but it's not. This is the second. Why is it we don't talk about the second time? I guess maybe after we did it once, we went, well, he's done that before, But I mean, you stop and think about it, and I kind of think, I don't know about y'all, but I kind of think of the Jordan River, especially in the description, the wording that the scripture that you read, put it kind of reminded me of the Mississippi River. You know, Mississippi River is a pretty big body of water, but especially during wet times, what happens to it? It gets a lot bigger, doesn't it? It gets a lot bigger. I don't know. I've been working now in West Memphis for about 6 years, and I worked there for 2 years, many years ago. So for about 8 years, I've worked in West Memphis, and it will surprise you how wide that river can get. But yet, God said, "Don't worry about it." Now, we know what big event for the Israelites is coming pretty quickly. Does anybody know? If you don't, you can just flip over a page or two. You're going to see a title at the top of the page. It's the fall of Jericho. Yeah, right? God's taking them across. Y'all, I don't think it's an accident that God gives them this sign, right? Before He takes them across to Jericho, because they've heard about Jericho. They understand what they're going into. And God's now saying this land is going to be yours. And He's going to take them across the river. But to take it, you're going to have to take that city first. That city with the huge walls, the thick walls, the impenetrable walls. You know, we're going to have to go over there. And I don't think it's accidental that God uses this method as He's taking them into the situation. I think God's screaming at the top of His lungs, "Listen, I know what I'm doing. I know what's going on, and I know where we're headed." But I can't help but think about the last time this happened to me. And God took them across the Red Sea, and just a few days, weeks, months later, they were sitting at the foot of the mountain worshiping a golden calf. But y'all, I hate to tell you, I don't believe with any part of my being that the Jews here are any different than us. I believe that God gives us signs all the time of the direction we need to head and things we need to do. And it's up to us as to whether or not we're going to listen and whether or not we're going to follow through. But in this story, I found 3 things that I want us to point out and think about. The first point is this. He said, but don't go immediately, wait for the ark. Why the ark?
Because it's God's presence.
It's God's presence, right? What was between the cherubim on the ark? Was it there a pillar of smoke? At times, that would be there, right? At times. That was God's presence. The ark sat in the Holy of Holies in the temple once it was built, right? And so, God's presence was truly there, and He used that ark to represent Himself. So, my first thought out of this story is number 1, follow where God leads you, right? Now, sometimes it don't make a lot of sense. Right? And sometimes it don't seem like we're headed in the right place. But I do want you to understand that there's one thing that's really important. Joshua 3, look at verses 3 and 4. And they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests and the Levites bear it, you shall remove it from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near to it, that ye may know the way by which ye must go. So what was He really doing with His ark? He was literally leading them in the direction He wanted to go. He said, don't get too close to it. We want you to stay back so that you can see where it's at, so that you know exactly where you're headed and exactly what's going on. So, when we talk about following where God leads us, number 1, we need to realize that when God calls His people to go, He leads. I don't know about you, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. My wife was talking the other night, and I went, well, you're starting to sound a lot like me. I can't help it, y'all. I'm the dummy, and Mr. Weeks can probably attest to this. He's been witness to it a while. I'm the dummy that everybody complains to, so that when it comes time for the discussion and nobody wants to bring up the subject that really needs to be talked about, I'm the idiot who goes, okay, look, this is what we're getting at. This is what we're saying. Or this is what's being said. Or this is what's being... And y'all, a lot of times in my life, I really wish I wasn't that person. Because what's hilarious is that person who is actually doing that, trying to help others, trying to be helpful to others, trying to show compassion for others, trying to be the one who's willing to stand out there and do that, makes you look like you're the troublemaker. So I've been at the front of the group leading the way. It's not always fun, but God doesn't lead like that. When God leads, God goes in front of us. He's ahead of it. Now there's something else going on here though. These people have been here a little while. Have you noticed? They've got a camp set up. They're doing, they're eating food. They're hanging out with their neighbors, probably sitting around, you're talking about instruments, they're probably sitting around at night playing instruments with each other. And they're on camp. There are people on the move. They're nomadic people and always have been, had that ability. But they've made a camp and they're sitting there and they're just waiting on God to start leading. Y'all, I dare to say when they started to lead that day, the thought of going through that river, however that was going to happen, Josh was telling them something big's going to happen tomorrow. They don't know what it is. But they certainly know that on the other side of that river is a big old city that we're going to have to overtake somehow. I don't know about y'all, but camp would have looked really good to me at that time. God, I appreciate it. I thank you. But, I'm just going to stay here. I'm just going to hang out. And so it would have been easy for them to just say, nah. But that's why God led them. We were talking just before church. We as humans, we tend to see the bad things. We tend to see the negative things. What do we mark time by? Bad stuff. Do we know? September the 11th. What about December 7th, 1941? Right? We tend to mark things by negative attitudes. We tend to focus on those. What I think God wants us to see and understand is this. Fear sees obstacles. Faith sees opportunities. Now, have I talked to y'all before about picking up each other? I don't know if I have or not. Okay, I'm going to tell y'all to do what my wife does. I'll start telling the story, and if it starts sounding familiar to you, just go. We've heard that with preaching, just go on with it. Right. My wife has my stories numbered. Oh, that's number 35. That's number 15. I've heard that one several times. And I am in no way encouraging anyone to do dangerous activities. You understand? But I do want to convey to you a time in my life where something happened that I felt was important. I have always had a bad habit to pick up hitchhikers. I just did it. I don't know why. Now, I do want to say in front, I am a man who typically carries a couple of weapons with him. while he's traveling, if you know what I mean. I studied martial arts for 37 years, so it's not like I'm completely, helpless in the situation. But I always tended to stop and pick up hitchhikers. And I was working in Oklahoma with my father, and I got stuck on guard duty on the job site in Chickasha, Oklahoma, just south of Oklahoma City, on I-30. And I had about a 2-mile loop that I would make. I would start at the north end of the job site and ride the interstate down to a gas station that was about 2 miles down, and then I'd go across the gas station to the other side of the interstate, get out and come back up, and that was my loop so that I could watch the entire job site and watch for people breaking in or stealing things, etc., etc. And I just make this 2-mile loop all night long from 6 o'clock in the evening to 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, in doing so, you see a lot of people, see a lot of things, and I stopped. The first time there was a guy on the side of the road, and I don't know, stop picking him up. Well, who else is going to do it? Blah, 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 blah. So I stopped picking him up. And it turned out the guy was a preacher. So I took him down to the gas station, let him down, he used the phone, made a phone call, somebody came tonight. A few weeks later, making my 2-mile loop, and a car stopped on the side of the road. And this person was, a fairly small person, not anybody that sent off any flags or anything. So I stopped and, come on, get in, I'll take you down to the gas station, you can call somebody, blah, blah, blah. So they got in the car with me, took them down. We got out of the car, I said, by the way, my name's Rowdy, Fortson, you are, and he told me he was a preacher as well. I'm like, wow, pretty cool. So I'm making my 2-mile loop a few months later, and I come by this car that I'm just going to be honest with you, a pretty brand new car. I mean, it looked like it should have stopped several miles ago, and so, and standing out underneath the hood is a mountain of a man. I'm talking, this dude was big. And he wasn't dressed in very nice clothes, and I just thought, you know what? Nah, this is not happening. And so I made my circle for a little while, and then I came back around, and I saw him, again after a few times. Maybe I need to, maybe I don't, make a few more loops. Finally, I said, look, just stop, Rowdy, just stop. Stop, I get out, I go to him, and I said, can I help you? He said, well, really all I need you to do is if you'll just take this card and call AAA for me when you get down to that gas station and tell them where I'm at, and they'll come get me. Okay, that's no problem, So I take this card from him. It's just a generic card that says you don't call this number if you're having problems. So I said, I started getting back the card, and I said, by the way, I'm sure they're going to ask me what your name is. I said, what's your name? He goes, oh, no big deal. Just tell them it's Reverend Booker T. Allred. Wow. So 3 times, it was a preacher. Now, this was at a time before I ever started preaching. And so, you've got a situation here where things look pretty dangerous and could have potentially been dangerous very easily. And by the way, I still have my bad habit. I picked one up this morning on the way here. I dropped him off at McDonald's a little bit ago before I pulled up. Headed to BB, he said. And I said, well, I'll get you to 67, and that'll take you straight to where you're going. But if we trust God and we realize that God goes in front of us and walks in front of us, then we're not really afraid of the situation. It's like that thing we used to say in martial arts class, Mr. Weeks. Sic vis pacem parabellum. Right? You seek peace. but you prepare for battle. Not because you want battle, it's just because that way you're prepared. If it happens to come your way. We have to understand that God sometimes asks us to do things that to us might look dangerous, might look hard, might look difficult, might look like something we don't really want to do. But He always prepares the way for us. And God always leads us if we'll look for it. If we'll try to see it. Look at Ephesians chapter 3 in verse 20. And I think you'll recognize this verse. Matter of fact, does anybody remember the song singing group from the late 80s, early 90s? Well, for many years, called a cappella. Ever hear a cappella?
Yeah.
They did this verse in a song. Now to Him who is able to do abundantly more, right? And all we ask or imagine, according to the power that is at work within us, to Him be the glory, to Him be the glory, to Him be the glory. God has the ability to do everything. He has the ability to accomplish anything. He has the ability to take us through everything. You might recognize a couple names here. Daniel. Right? Better than Daniel, at least Daniel was an adult male, right? What about David? Right? Who as a child slew a lion with the jawbone of an donkey, right? Think about it. Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Right? Who said, look, dude, this is Arkansas paraphrasing. Look, dude, I don't really care who you are. We're not bowing down to you. So you can throw us in there if you want to, but our God's going to save us. But just in case, if He doesn't, that's okay too, because our God will have a reason. But when they stood and looked into that fire, they didn't see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, did they? They saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and a fourth person. God may take us at times through things that look a little difficult, look a little hard, look a little rough. But God always leads us. But He not only He's in front taking the path. And He goes through it with us. But I got to be honest with you. Look at verses 5 through 8. Verses 5 through 8 of Joshua 3. And Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves for tomorrow. The Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua spake to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and pass it over before the people. And they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said unto Joshua, this day will I begin to magnify thee in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And thou shalt command the priests to bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you come to the brink of the water of Jordan, you'll stand still in it. What did He tell them to do first? He said, sanctify yourselves. So we understand that we're to follow where God leads us. But I think we also need to understand that to some extent, we got to prepare. We got to be prepared be used. I can't count the number of times when I go to do something, and don't get me wrong, I am not mechanically inclined at all. But periodically my wife will come up with something, or my daughters will say, Dad, can you fix this? Well, let me look at YouTube. You know, you go to YouTube and you figure it all out. It's just like yesterday. And my wife has been stopped twice in my car now for no license plate elimination. You know that's a real bad crime, right? Not having a light on your license plate. So I finally decided better put some bulbs in them things. So I watched YouTube. They told me how to do it. Oh man, you just grab that little plastic cover on the inside of your gate that opens up in the back and just pop it down. It's no big deal. Yeah. Except for half of the little things that hold that thing in place that are now stuck in the holes up there, and the piece that you just took off no longer has the things that's supposed to hold it. Well, I'll just grab my needle noses and pull those out and then stick them back in down here. Will that work for 3 out of 4? The fourth one's now in the trash. Because every time I tried to grab a hold of it and pull, it just broke off. You know, every time I go to get a tool for something or to do something, it seems like I either can't find it or there's something going on because I haven't used it, because I've let it become old or rusted, or right? Because I don't use those tools. Now we have to prepare. We have to be prepared, and we have to stay prepared. I tell people all the time, I was a Cub Scout. Boy Scouts motto was be prepared. Yeah. Be prepared. But you know what, Mr. Weech, I know you've heard me say this before to our martial arts classes. Tell me, if you realize that martial artists are just overgrown Boy Scouts. We're prepared. Right? That's all they're saying. Oh, so there's a threat that needs to be dealt with. Whatever that threat is. The normal person who's not prepared usually freezes up and doesn't know what to do, etc., etc. So the martial artist steps forward and says, I can do this. And the person on the other side says, okay, well let's do physical combat. Okay, I can do that. Right? Because I'm not throwing a punch 150 times like a typical bully or person that you might think of as a real tough guy from school or whatever. I throw 150 punches a night in class. Right? You're prepared. Well, what if that person sees that you're prepared, right? Then what do they have the tendency to do? Well, if that's the problem, if the physical's not going to scare you and back you down, then let me take it up a notch. Let's pull out a blade. Okay? Guess what? I've been there and done that too. Let's go. Oh, well now wait a second. I wasn't expecting that at all. Well here then, I'll tell you what, let's put the blades away and let me take out a gun. Okay? I got you, I'm covered. Let's do that. Not because I want to, but because that's what the situation calls for. You're prepared. That's what military is all about, isn't it? That's what the police is all about, isn't it? Preparing someone for the worst situation that could possibly happen. So that when it happens, you can handle that situation. We have two young people who recently been interested in EMT stuff. You know, you want stressful. Well, that's stressful. You roll into a place, you don't know what's going on. Somebody's hurt, you don't know what you're dealing with at all. You're prepared for whatever happens, whatever takes place. Sometimes as we go throughout this world, God calls on us to do things that are difficult, that are hard, that are overwhelming. But I believe it would be easier if we realized that God leads us every time He calls us. I think it would be much easier if we realized that God expects us to be prepared at all times. But the bottom line comes down to verses 15 and 16 in Joshua 3. At some point, you got to quit dealing with the hypothetical and the theoretical, right? And you got to start dealing with reality. Because at some point, you got to make a decision. In verse 15 and 16, we see them go down, stand in that water, and what happens? The waters from above, literally, just like they were told, start to pile up. Right? Heap up. And the waters that were downstream start to trickle away. Y'all ever been to Rivervale? Never been to Rivervale? I encourage you, and you're going to laugh at me. If you ever go there, he told me to come see this. It is a literal hole-in-the-wall town in the Mississippi Delta over north of Lepanto. As if Lepanto's a place to mark something about. Lepanto's about this big too, right?
Is it on purpose?
But Rivervale is important because it's the only place in the world where two rivers cross and never touch. Because many, many years ago, where agriculture was so important, right, in the Delta, when they made those rivers cross each other, because one's a man-made river, all the water started trying to go one direction down one of those rivers and cut off the other direction. And the farmers down the river was, whoa! No! We got to have water too! So the government came in and dug a channel underneath that river and built concrete boxes through that channel so that that river would flow underneath the other one, come out on the other side and keep going, and the waters would never mix. And you can see it at Rivervale because when you start to cross the bridge, you look over here, and all you see is it looks like a tin roof on a barn. It's just got rivers that go like this. That's the top of the concrete box where that river goes underneath that. Pretty neat thing. Pretty neat thing. But at some point, you got to make a decision. And when you make that decision that you're going to do something that's not really been seen and done before, right? But it's got to be done. So you make a decision and you do it. I'm sure the people who built that project, as well as the ones who built all the levees and the rivers and everything, have y'all ever noticed? I mean, I know you've noticed, but you realize, right, that when you start to go into Martree, right, you got to go over those three bridges that are one after another. You realize that to get up on the first bridge, you went up, right? And then three bridges later, you go down, right? It's because between those two humps of land is where they run all the water of the Mississippi River when it gets overflowing, right? It's the floodlands, right? But I'm sure when somebody said, look, we got to do something about this flooding, right? Johnny Cash is 3 feet high and rising, right? You know? I mean, those levees were built to stop that from happening so you could have viable farmland. But imagine the first person to sit down and go, we need to build a system that will hold all this flood water. How would you start that process? Let me tell you how to start that process. Somebody took a shovel and put it in the ground. Right? was a decision made. Y'all, when we live our life and we see that God is leading us somewhere that may be more difficult, maybe more than what we think we can handle, maybe heavier, maybe tougher, maybe a little farther out there than what we really want to go, we just got to realize that when God takes us somewhere, He leads us. And that when He leads us, it will stay prepared, that we can handle that then. And then when it comes down to that, really the only place to go from there is just to make the decision and go. Because we know the outcome of Joshua 3, right? They fought and took that city and never had to raise a hand at all. Except the ones that were blowing on those horns, right? God gave them that city. But they had to make the decision to cross that river. They had to make the decision to leave that camp. They had to make the decision to sanctify themselves and be prepared. They had to make the decision to get up and start walking. Or God would have never given me anything. God loves us. He tells us, I want you to have life and I want you to have it more abundant. Christians ought to be the happiest people on the face of the planet. Just not sure we get that sometimes. We all deal with cancer in some way. We all deal with troubles, trials. God's there, and He'll walk through it all with us if we just let Him. Father, we want to thank You for this day. We want to thank You for the opportunity to read Your word and understand it. We want to thank You for the chance to gather together with each other. And we just ask, Father, that as we get ready to leave these walls and go out into the world, that just as every time we take that light from those candles and we transfer it like we're transferring Your light out into the world, help us to go out prepared and willing to follow Your lead and willing to make the decision to do whatever You ask. Help us to strive daily, hourly, by the minute, to be prepared to face whatever it is You have prepared for us. Help us to make the right decisions and to follow You and Your Son in Your willingness to sacrifice and do whatever was needed. Help us to be